like to just take a minute to introduce Finian Makepeace, who is the co-founder and policy director and lead educator for Kiss the Ground. He's a renowned presenter, media creator, and thought leader in the field of regenerative agriculture and soil health. And I have been personally been a member of Kiss the Ground for a number of years now. And so I'm just super excited to have Finian here. And I've just really appreciated over the last couple of years getting to know Kiss the Ground, how accessible they make the concepts of soil health and regenerative agriculture to everybody, and really help spread the message of why this is important for us to all be thinking about and how we can all get involved. And just a very quick side note for those of you who know Erica Campbell from here in Vermont, she's their policy manager now. So there's actually a very nice connection between Vermont and Kiss the Ground. And with that, Finian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for being here. Looking forward to connecting with you today. And I just have to say, I really love the theme for this year's Compost Awareness Week. It's quite in line with what I like to talk about. So really start that. I just wanted to share quickly, I'm in a strange location. It's kind of like a bunker for the NRCS here in Maryland. Nobody's here. They're out at some event at the National Mall building something, but we just came from meeting Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack at an RCS event, as well as the Chief Crosby, and really great momentum there, talking about regen ag and soil health. And but then we had to find a secret place to run and do this presentation. So luckily everything came together and we have internet. So if it's at all spotty at any point, let me know and I'll just turn my camera off, but I'm in the middle of nowhere because we ran out of time to get to my hotel. So thanks for bearing with that. So I'm really excited about this. Regeneration is my favorite topic to discuss and to uncover and unlock for activists and advocates, especially for compost. This was one of the original aspects of Kiss the Ground 9 years ago when we formed. We were really giving and getting the information around how critical conversion of organic matter is and how big of an asset that can be in soil restoration as well as regeneration. All right, without further ado, I just want to jump into it. So again, my favorite topic, regeneration, compost recipe for regeneration. That's what we're really going to be talking about today, and how each of you can open this up more. Hopefully some of these tools I provide today will allow you to more actively advocate on behalf of compost as a recipe for regeneration. So this slide is really important to me because while we're not saying something is wrong with sustainability, we're trying to actively communicate that the time for sustaining is not yet, is not now, and that regeneration is absolutely required. And therefore, can humanity really buckle down and connect with this opportunity of regeneration across the board versus the push for sustaining where we currently are? So you'll hear me talking about regeneration in comparison or connecting to sustainability and how important it is that we know this difference. Today, we're going to be looking at thinking quite a bit and looking at how change happens. And arguably across the board, our actions are dictated by our views and how we think of things. I put this simply, everyone probably views or has the view that they should brush their teeth at night. Therefore, the action is you brush your teeth, and then your outcome is that your teeth aren't falling out of your head. But that view dictating our actions is really true. Well, oftentimes we're at a confrontation with our daily lives and what's around us. It's still at the end of the day how powerful our views are, whether or not they're going to lead. And so a lot of what we work on at Kiss the Ground is based on view change. Can we alter how people are perceiving the world, therefore creating groundswell or grassroots type of thinking that is allowing for actions and outcomes to change? That said in another way, if you're looking at movement building, oftentimes movements can remain niche with those that are in the know when we don't collectively do enough to spread awareness. So Kiss the Ground started because we learned about an idea called soil health and regenerative ag, or building soil health as a critical component to solving a multitude of humanity's facing. And we said, okay, well, there's definitely not enough awareness about this, because I was 29 at the time and I had no idea. And I thought I knew most things about environmental consciousness and what have you. So we got really clear that awareness has to happen on all fronts. And how can we give empowerment to those who are involved already to be better at being awareness spreaders, and for those who are just getting involved? So everyone who's either new to a movement, just joining, or those who've been in it for a legacy time, how can we give everyone more access to be awareness spreaders, such that we move out of niche mode into critical mass, allowing for a movement of actions and outcomes to be much more widespread. So first, I don't know how it is here, but we're probably just going to ask for folks to share either in the chat, but I'd love to hear some voices as well. Our first assignment for today's keynote is, what is compost? Now, the purpose of this exercise is for you to get more connected to how you are talking about compost. But more importantly, I hope that there are several instances today of people who work on the same teams, meaning at the same business, at the same compost place, or the same advocacy group or whatnot. But really, it's important here to understand the diversity of how we're talking about this concept and where we want to start moving it towards. So your first assignment, we're going to take 2 minutes, write down on a piece of paper or on your computer right now, what is compost? And I'll just be silent for a minute here. What is compost? You're just describing it in a sentence.
And Finian, do you want them to put it into the chat, or?
Yes, please, if they can put in the chat, and then we'll have some people speak it out as well, so I can kind of talk it through with them. There's no right answer. This is just to see where we're at and how we're thinking. Yeah, please, everyone, read what's coming in. As soon as you put your answer into the chat, please read what else is being written. And sorry about the wind again.
Mm-hmm. And Finian, do you want me to start reading some of the things from chat, or?
Sure, I can read through them, and then we'll just have someone speak to it. So we have nutrient-rich organic matter, nutrients, vitamins, healing, amendment for soils and plants, organic material used as a plant fertilizer, recycling food scraps and other organic materials to become a nutrient-rich soil amendment. Compost is the process of controlled decomposition of organic matter, the aerobic decomposition of organic matter. Compost is decayed organic matter containing nutrients and diverse population of microorganisms. Material made from aerobic decomposition of organic matter. Compost is the result of biological reactions. Living nutrient-rich organic matter. Nature's way of recycling. Okay, great. We're gonna stop for there for a second. Awesome. So I want to reflect for a minute the general tendency for how we're describing this and how it's connected to the world of regeneration and this recipe for regeneration. So the title of the Compost Awareness Week is Recipe for Regeneration. And in a lot of this language, and I want you to look at yourself right now as an entity or within an entity, collectively, if you're working with a group, how is your group defining compost? This is real. Language is real, and how you're talking about it. Nothing's wrong with any of the descriptions here, but how you're talking about it ultimately will have consequences for how it is perceived in the world and what the actions are of people's views about it, right? If our views dictate our actions and then the outcomes, the view here, what is compost? If you all are leading in the compost industry, taking a moment to reflect on the availability for action and outcomes that you're desiring to come from even the descriptions of how and in what way You're talking about compost, right? Compost is arguably this just ridiculously magical substance that allows for cascading effects of regeneration to occur. If you're describing it in a way, nitrogen and carbon decompose, nothing wrong with that. Living nutrient-rich organic matter, nothing wrong with that. But I just want us to consider and listen to, if you were a marketer, if you were a branding agency, and you were trying to help yourself with a campaign for compost, would this be how you describe what compost is? And if it's technically like, well, this is what compost is technically, okay, great. Maybe that's in subtext, but in your branding, I purposely didn't tell you exactly what this exercise was going to do, because I wanted to hear how we're naturally talking about compost. So this is great. I want you to use these answers, write them down on a piece of paper or somewhere else that you can share with your team. And I want you to collectively reflect on that. Anybody have anything they want to share on their description? Does anyone want to verbally share in a description of compost? Liz, let's take Liz. Liz Bazorge, Nature's Way of Recycling. Tell us about that.
Oh gosh, I wish I had made it up, but I didn't. I read that somewhere and I loved it. It was short and snappy and to the point.
Okay, what does that evoke for you? And then what would you say, if you're listening from the context of recipe for regeneration, what is missing there?
For me, it evokes just the successful PR of recycling. Not that recycling itself is successful, but that everyone knows what it is and they want to participate. Even though there's a lot of wish cycling going on, people want to do it, they mean to do well. So to say it's nature's way of recycling, people already know more or less what recycling is. So it's already it's connecting it to something that exists that people know about.
Agreed. Yeah, on the other side of that.
But what is it missing?
In terms of our context of recipe for regeneration.
Well,
what does regeneration mean to you?
So I'm a recycling coordinator. So recycling is taking something and making it into something new. But in science, matter is not created; it's just transformed. So I don't know. Great.
Well, perfect answer, and that's the perfect segue to our next part. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in that. So this next slide is not obvious, a very used quote by Albert Einstein. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. But I really like what was just said. I'm so sorry. Liz just said, sorry. So we're going to dive into that a bit more, and we're going to do another quick exercise. And you can type in the chat here. What does degeneration mean? The word degeneration. Going to be quick on this one. Degrade. Break apart, loss, weakening, taking without replenishing, loss, lower quality or quantity. Great. Awesome. That's enough examples. Perfect. Yes. And in this model, we're saying ecosystem carrying capacity or ecosystem function interchangeably, time in production. That means while you are farming or utilizing the land for some type of agriculture or other, great, decline or deterioration. Awesome. So we are now collectively understanding the word degeneration, what it means, and then contextualizing it with an ecosystem or carrying capacity or ecosystem landscape function, and looking at a time continuum of something getting worse, not functioning at its highest state any longer. Great. All right, what does the word, it's not letting me click on there. There you go. What does the word sustain or sustaining mean? Maintain, good. This is just getting our minds in the same place together. Status quo, stay the same, good. Maintaining status quo, continuing indefinitely. Great, any more? Wonderful. And in this XY graph here, we have ecosystem carrying capacity or function again, and time in production. So we're essentially maintaining, sustaining where we've gotten to in this. So why we're talking about this is to clarify what the word and therefore the entirety of the meaning means. And it means itself. It means sustaining, maintaining where it is, where something's at. Someone here said livable, and it's depending on which definition, but most definitions wouldn't necessarily say livable. Most of the definitions say something close to this, able to be maintained without being completely used up or destroyed. That's one of the most common dictionary definitions. So we're recognizing that a sustain, even though there's no harm in the intent of it, its actual meaning is important when we look at how we're thinking and feeling and comprehending. All right, what does regeneration mean? Building up, improve, increase, generate again, perfect, renewable, all great. So this in the same graph, we're looking at time in production or time in use. We are increasing carrying capacity or landscape function during that time. And this arguably, in the historic context for humanity, in most of our cultures across the world, as populations increased, the ability to regenerate landscapes as we're producing food, as populations increased, is not the norm. While many indigenous cultures did live in a stewardship build, most populations across the world, if you look archaeologically, if you look ecologically, have been degenerative over time or somewhat sustaining over time, but very few have been regenerative, meaning that they're building back ecosystem carrying capacity while they're producing more food. There's a bunch of cultures in the United States who have been able to do this that are under-recognized for doing so, and several others around the world. But in general, regeneration as population increases happen with humanity is not the norm. So when we're saying regeneration can happen, we're looking at specifically ecosystem function or something functioning again. So why we're identifying this, therefore, is saying, okay, what Liz is bringing up is really important part of this, that, you know, we're nothing is new. There's no new carbon molecules. There's no newness. There's no new water. Everything's being exchanged. But the key distinguishing thing I want to make here is regeneration has to do with something going back to its highest functioning state or ability. So recycling or turning something else into something else is different than something having a technical cascading effect of getting better. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But first, really quick, this is our historical recognition of where we're at now. And this graph is essentially saying that sustainability, the push for it, is ahead of its time. If you have that in your job title, you're just ahead of the curve. We have to regenerate and we have to cause regeneration now, then sustainability makes sense. So we're saying we are here after 10,000 years of agriculture across the world. We've generally degraded most of the earth, especially in the last 200 years. Now we have to regenerate, then we can sustain. So just recognizing really where we're at in the curve. Now here is a bit of a contextual element. When we're talking about recycling, we're talking about, again, it's really important what Liz said. There's 100% truth to it. You know, there's always the same amount that we have that is in existence on Earth. That's 100% true. But part of the context we have to face, Liz and others, is that when we look at an environment, most of us, when we're considering recycling or sustaining it and having it maintained, we don't have an historical context for that place. So I lived in California for 15 years. Most people think California is an arid desert and don't look at the Central Valley as this, you know, giant wetlands that it once was. They look at it as a desert. So when we're saying sustain or recycle from that point, we are missing something critical, which is the opportunity for regeneration. As you see on the right here, starting from a diminished place and ever increasing cascading effects of multitudes of regeneration, something increasing its function, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a watershed, whether it's a person or a garden or whatnot, whatever scale or magnitude. But the difference of sustaining, and kind of why I have the recycling symbols there, it's not the bash recycling, it's to remind us when we start where we're at versus an historical context of what something used to function like, we often miss the mark on the potential that is in front of us if we're stuck in reuse what we currently have, replace what, if something was missing, like, oh, that tree right there, we cut it down, let's plant another tree. Are we helping regenerate an ecosystem, or are we just doing a one-for-one match? And that's kind of the thought of regeneration in that context. So, any questions on that really quick before I jump?
I don't see any. But
No question, but can
yes.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I really appreciate what you point out about recycling is not equal to regenerating, because nowadays, especially United States have a very brilliant people and young dreamers and new ventures with all quick funding. But if without the whole ecosystem as a foundation of like EMBA courses or high-tech courses or law degrees requirements, usually it's out of a real foundation of a framework that really can feed them back even before they get all of the chips.
I missed a little bit of it, but I think I heard what you were saying, and it's, if I heard you right, I think it's precisely what I was about to point to here, and that is the context for which we are having innovation happen. Humans are incredibly gifted, innovative creatures, but if we're innovating inside of a framework of sustainability or conservation based on the level of degradation that we have, we've missed an incredible opportunity, and that's where Recipe for Regeneration becomes our center point again. Basically, across the boards, our soil are sick and broken. Sick and broken are key words I'm choosing here, because if we don't look at them as sick and broken, we're not looking at two optional factors. Something that's sick, you can make healthy again, right? Requires care. Something that's broken, you acknowledge that it's broken, so then there's room to help fix it. So when we look at these words and we utilize them, we're actually strengthening the opportunity for regeneration when we recognize something as sick and broken. Land is not functioning. I gotta hide this chat here real quick. So rebuilding soil is gluing it back together. That's a key part I want everyone to leave today with. Composting, and I'm going to say this many times, so just hear me out right now. Composting isn't just for compost's sake. It's to help plants pump carbon into the ground so that microbes can glue our ground back together. I'll say that again in a minute with other context, but I just want to repeat that so you're understanding my personal opinion and many others' opinion about compost as a means, not the end unto itself. Okay, so we talked about broken soil. So here's the analogy, and I'm forgetting Sunny. Currently, agriculture and technology right now is taking a broken cup and trying to figure out how we can utilize the broken pieces and the little water that's left in it instead of gluing the cup back together. So we have all this research funding, all of these brilliant brains working on how to take a desert, pardon me, I thought there was another slide there, how to take desertified land and like figure out how to do smart watering versus figuring out how to fix the broken soil. It's kind of insane. If we think about the amount of brain capacity we have heading towards this, we're trying to get the best out of a broken cup versus gluing the cup back together. So now we're going to talk really quick science shop about how you glue the cup back together. Quick question. Where does the substance or the mass of a tree come from? Just a couple people put in the chat, please. Where did my chat go? There it is. Where does the mass of a tree? Carbon in the air. Done. Yep, that was fast and easy. Most people don't answer this question correctly, but it's one of the best leverage points for getting people who are new to this conversation to be excited about the potential of regeneration. So thank you for answering that correctly, but just a reminder that 95% of audiences, people don't know this, so you can use it as a reminder of like, oh, you can bring them in to think differently when you ask them this question. Most people say it comes from the ground, and that's where their brain goes to, and that's where it stops. So you can help them move towards, it comes from thin air. Plants and trees are built from thin air. That's a really great, important context, again, to understand and be able to actively advocate for soil health. This is an important part that you're talking about, because when compost is just an amendment, it's different than when compost is a means to help increase the amount of carbon that's coming into the system of plants, but more importantly, coming in to the system of soil. So here's the big kicker, the big aha in soil science in the last 20 years is really unlocking how much carbon. So just a reminder, a leaf of a plant pulls carbon dioxide into its stomata, pulling water up from its root systems. Again, sorry about the wind. Pulling water up from its root systems, combining water, H2O, with CO2 to create liquid sugar, glucose molecules in sugar solution, water solution that it pumps through its body to grow itself. Like it uses that carbon, those carbon building blocks to grow itself. What we didn't know collectively, humanity, was how much the plants are pumping that liquid sugar into the system of the roots, exuding it out of its roots. That's a huge, huge carbon pump, 30 to 40, sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less, but generally you can say 30 to 40% of the liquid carbohydrates that a plant is making are being pumped out of its roots, leaked out of its roots to feed microorganisms in the soil. That is critically important. That is one of the big ahas of humans being active stewards of making land function again and bringing carbon into the ground. 30 to 40% of sugar shared out of the roots into the soil to feed microbes. Why would they do that? Because the microbes give them minerals and nutrients and water, and in exchange, they get the sugar that they get to eat and live off of. It is an exchange. It's called the big exchange, we say. Liquid carbon sugar for minerals and water. What this does is create carbon glued aggregates. So this is a simplification, but just imagine my fingers are the tips of the roots and it's leaking sweat, right? Pretend sweat, sugar water is coming off my fingers and feeding microbes all around the soil. Those microbes in their life process, whether it's fungi, bacteria, other microbes as well, create gluey substances. And because those microbes ate carbon-based sugars, they're made out of carbon, and the glue that they make is also made out of carbon. So that life and death process creates gluey carbon that sticks soil particles together, creating carbon-glued aggregate super sponges. This is nature's technology that took 500 million years of research and development to create, which is an insanely perfect way to absorb water, create habitat for life, and create the regenerative feedback loop, which I'll explain in one second. But here it is in another picture. You either have dirt or you have structured soil, right? You can amend soil with compost, right? It makes it better. It makes it have more nutrients available for the plant, but that's not the same as having glued together, carbon glued together soil. So we're going to explain why that's different in just a second. Pardon me. So on the right, you have a good ecosystem in terms of how carbon is being utilized and how solar power is utilized. On the left, you have not a good situation. So when we have bare soil, microbes in the soil are eating the carbon. That's a one-way pump of carbon out. When organisms consume, they create CO2, right? So you have a one-way pump. If you put compost onto the bare ground, it will help amend the soil so that it has a little bit more nutrients in it, so a plant could do better in it. But if you leave it bare, you're giving more you're giving more food for organisms, but inevitably after time, you are losing your carbon. It's turning back into CO2. So unless there's plants on the surface of the ground, you will not have a net gain of carbon. You will be losing more carbon on the left. If you do not have plants on the top, you will always have a net loss of carbon. Why there's a net gain of carbon when there's plants on the land is that nature evolved to utilize the CO2 that's coming up from the soil. So arguably, the more carbon you pump into the ground from plants, the more microbes you feed, which means the more CO2 is produced, because organisms consuming anything is creating CO2. But nature figured that out. That's why plants and grasses and leaves have stomata under the bottom of them. So when CO2 comes up, it recaptures that carbon and uses it and pushes it back into the soil. It's not going to capture all of the carbon, that CO2 that's coming up, but it's going to capture a lot of it and recycle it, put it back down into the ground. And that's where you're going to start getting a carbon gain. I hope that made sense. We're going quickly with this science. So ideally, if you're in compost, I implore you to still be trying to maximize photosynthesis. So can the compost you're applying to the ground anywhere or pushing for, can it be a helper, a means to maximize photosynthesis versus the end unto itself, meaning you've just amended the soil and left it bare? So plants feed microbes. Here's the regenerative feedback loop, right? Plants feed microbes and the microbes feed plants. But here's where it gets even better. So when you add compost to a layer of pasture, grass or whatever, you've provided a slow release nutrient, you've provided minerals, and you've provided microorganisms that in their process are enhancing the ability for the plant to photosynthesize. They're increasing the amount of microbes that the plant would share its sugars with, therefore increasing the likelihood or more sugars are being shared with the plant, from the plant to the soil microorganisms, because those populations of microorganisms exist. And then those minerals that are there are allowing for that plant to continue that in a long period of time. Now, here's the fun part. The more sugar the plant pumps into the ground, the more microbes it feeds. The more microbes it feeds, the more soil aggregation and soil sponges that are created with the glues that the microbes produce. The more spongy soil that's created, the more water and available nutrients are released, because microorganisms and water is held there. Therefore, the plant is able to access more of them, and then the plant can photosynthesize more. And with more photosynthesis and biodiversity of latent seeds and other things coming back, that ecosystem is now pumping more carbon in. That is a positive feedback loop with continual regeneration happening. Life begets life. See, I'm very excited about this topic. So this is important. I recommend taking a screenshot of this if you can. This came out of our friends at the Marine Carbon Project. This is really helpful when you're talking policy or whatever. I'm trying to move my screen so I can, there you go. We found that a single one-time application of compost doubled forage production, increasing 40 to 70%, and soil sequestration on average of 2.4 tons per acre over 3 years on both coastal wet and Sierra foothill dry Mediterranean grassland systems. Compost decomposition provides a slow-release fertilizer to the soils, leading to increases in carbon sequestration and plant production. Net ecosystem C storage increased by 25 to 70% without including the direct addition of compost C, while compost had no effect on nitrous oxide, N2, or CH4 emissions. This is critical. Now, what I was just saying before was elaborating on this too. But the amendment, right? We said it's not the end, it's the mean. So the amendment was how much compost you added to the soil. They're not counting that. All they're counting is the increase of carbon. So the original pile of compost isn't the carbon they're counting at all. They're counting the carbon that was added by the increased productivity of that system, therefore the increased potential of carbon sequestration. This is huge. So compost as a means versus compost as your ends is just huge in how you're positioning compost. You're creating the positive feedback loop of regeneration. Simply, compost increases photosynthesis, plant growth, and therefore the ability for plants to sequester carbon and build back soil structure. So this is just a slide that you can use for your own liking. Organics in the landfill is obviously bad. I know you all know that, but compost on rangelands is what this is talking about, or anywhere that you have photosynthesizing plants that you're adding compost, you can have this multitude of sequestration, but also regeneration occur. Rebuilding soil for risk mitigation. I don't have time today, and I'm also outside, but I encourage all of you to utilize, forgetting her name right now, why? The bread and flour demonstration from, why am I forgetting her name right now? She's a great friend of mine.
From Dee
Dee Pershhouse, thank you.
Mhm.
Dee Pershhouse. Dee Pershhouse's bread and flour demonstration never ceases to amaze anybody. You can show them what bare ground looks like, and then you can show them what healthy aggregated soil looks like when you pour, just look it up, YouTube, the bread and flour demo, and that will be a huge way for you as an activist or advocate to show how risky it is when we have degraded bare soil in terms of function of the ecosystem, function of the watershed, purity of our water in our streams, recharge of aquifers, etc. So the demonstration essentially shows you pour water like rain over 2 pieces of bread on a plate, you pour water like rain over a cup of flour, and you watch what happens. Your brain can pretty much tell you right now in your head. One shows that terrible degraded soil, and the other shows regenerated soil. That's something I recommend everybody take a look at and do. Here it is again in a picture form when you have aggregated absorbable soil, and then you have runoff or compaction. This is a great reminder that humans make muddy water. You can remind people of that when you do the bread and flour demo. Compost helps grow back functioning soil. Again, context here, the word grow. Compost is helping to grow back functioning soil. Imagine a lizard whose tail was chopped off. Regeneration makes the lizard become a functioning lizard again. Allowing for plants to rebuild our soil, helping with compost, is what's allowing soil to function again. Compost for soil health equals compost for human health. We're going to brush through this one. The real efficiency is biology. Your tongue knows the difference. And here we're going to explain, wait, what happened? Oh, there's the slide. So this is from David Montgomery's book. This is just reminding us that at the root zone, it's the microbes that are being fed. And this is a general account, but over half of all minerals that are made available for plants are made available because a microorganism release them from the minerals in the soil, not just because they're available or because we had to add nitrogen fertilizer or something. So plant available nutrients over half of them come from biology releasing them. So without the compost, you won't get that happening quickly. Your tongue knows the difference. So what is your offer to farmers and landscapers in cities? So we're going to take a quick moment for you to note down. You don't have to share this publicly on the chat right now, but I just want you to take 1 minute and just write down what comes to mind of how you want to start offering this to farmers and landscapers or your cities. What new framing might you employ in your mission to move this forward? Great. Or also just take a screenshot of this and share it with yourself later and work on this with your team. But I encourage you to make an offer and not look at it just like, oh, how do we talk about compost? Develop it from an offer. What are you offering the world of farmers, landscapers, and cities, or people you haven't encountered yet? You have one of the most remarkable substances on planet Earth to help in regeneration. So I encourage you to not just look at the Compost Council's poster, but talk about your own group. How are you making an offer to the world that revolves around this amazing, amazing opportunity to be of service to ecosystem function, biodiversity, to carbon sequestration, and much more. Here's one from me. Compost isn't a substitution or a better alternative. It's an opportunity for regeneration, carbon sequestration, increased water holding capacity, biodiversity, food nutrition, and more. So here are some tools for compost as regenerative. The Compost Story. It's a film we made with the Compost Council a few years ago. Thecompoststory.com or YouTube, The Compost Story. Kiss the Ground, the movie, is an incredible contextual around regeneration in compost. Has an amazing piece on compost in that from San Francisco. There's a great piece called Carbon Farming, Harnessing the Power of the Soil, Climate. And then there's Climate Victory Gardens. Those are some things you can YouTube to use. But I encourage you also, if you're going to do a screening of Kiss the Ground, for example, you can have a panel follow-up discussion around how the city or the county or the region is going to start utilizing compost much more as a means to do regenerative impact versus what people's old context of it was. This is the Kiss the Ground movie, so use it, please, for yourselves or for your organizations to spread the word. Here's some posters. I can send these as follow-up if you want to use any of these. The U.S. Composting Council has these as well. This is from the Compost Story. These are just like little posters. You can print them out. You can use them. Please, it's just fun if you want to do this stuff. Messaging. You can. This is just from my brain that made this happen. You can. I'm encouraging you all to like do stuff like this. Go bold. Be big about this. We'll support you in any way we can. These are just some things. Composting, helping humanity regenerate Earth. So your responsibility, each of you have a responsibility now. These doctors have a responsibility. They have the ability to respond to someone's head injury, but all of you now have a responsibility to talk about compost as a regenerative substance and advocate for it like you never have before, because we've all been in this. We're talking about it now. I'm in response able to spread awareness, and that's what I'm doing on the front of Regen Ag and Soil Health, and imploring all modalities possible. Remember, a movement starts with awareness. Each of you can be key awareness spreaders, and that, like, even if you're doing the actions and creating the outcomes, can you increase? So this is another question for you or the groups you're working with. Bring this back to a serious set of meetings. How are we actively awareness spreaders to move the needle as on compost as a regenerative substance? Where can we leverage that more? Where are we underemploying that? So bring that back, workshop that. Where are you underemploying the use of your voice to spread awareness, even if you're already doing the actions? We need to build back soil so that land functions again. The glue to build back the soil structure comes from the CO.
Oops. Well, folks, it looks like Finian may have lost his connection. Let's just give a minute and see if he is able to join back in.
Hey, so sorry about that.
Oh, there we go.
Again, we came to the Center for Soil and Water, and nobody was here, so I wasn't allowed inside. So my computer just died. I'm really sorry about that. Essentially, the context is that compost as a means to increase or enhance soil's ability to function is just huge. So with that, I wanted to just share a couple more things and then leave time for questions. One thing that's happening, a big offer we want to provide for you all, we have something called Soil Advocate Training. It's a 9-week online masterclass for soil advocacy. It includes a lot of stuff about composting. That's starting on Wednesday as a cohort. The cool thing about cohort is that you're taking it with other students and you have a live session for an hour and a half every week with other students. That's going to start on Wednesday this week. You can sign up at kisstheground.com. We'd love to see some of you there and get more folks from composting in there. Otherwise, feel free to take that online. We also have other courses and lots of materials at kisstheground.com. So that's the first thing. And then we're also starting a national campaign this month of May. We're starting Regenerate America. We're launching on May 17th. This is a national campaign to ensure that regenerative agriculture and soil health are robustly supported in the coming Farm Bill. And this is going to be an exciting campaign. We'd love to have all you involved in and make sure compost gets included as much as possible as well in that effort. But those are the two things. So look out for coalition or join as a group to that coalition. Please email us or go to regenerateamerica.com. You can check that out. But with that being said, I think if there's anything else. The last thing I would encourage you to do is to dive in with your company and look around for materials, reusing materials, creating events around this context that are reintroducing you and your brand. I think, if you're selling compost, if you're creating compost, there's no shame in promoting it as a really important product, because it is. When it's used right, compost is just extraordinary. So I'm all about it. But that's it for the presentation. I'd love to pass it over for questions if we have them.
Okay, Sunny has put something in the chat. Sunny, actually, this is quite long. Do you want to maybe just unmute and speak?
Oh, yes, sorry.
No worries.
Since we are also kind of embracing the pretty large international stakeholders in the new generation, and nowadays AI is great in a lot of agriculture and many needed process of collaborative work and the result for the civilization. However, to really let the young generation embracing the kiss the ground philosophy and the implementation, and really, in the peership, among their peers and the topics, really happy about this. What really, probably work to many of us is we experiencing the farm living style and security. And if from the public schools, they have lots of land, so no single house student, parent, or faculty need to worry about one large full-season work. However, a student can really see how the poops of the animals before human poops come meaningfully without seeing all of the animals are for food source. But it can be in science, knowledge, and research, and all other new occupations and new business, new networking, and new funding, new ventures. They can, in art and gallery and animation and marketing and advocacy, they can find our ways to assist them in the business models and financing. However, they can establish this kind of joy, observing and agreeing, and then researching, and then confirming what we old folks are trying to say beyond their romance and their scores of school study pressures and application to higher education. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I heard, sorry, it was a little bit choppy for me, but I think what I was hearing is that when we're offering holistic framing and contextually relevant holistic framing in school, it will lead down the road to innovative thinking and breaking outside of our current model, where our thinking is stunted, and therefore the innovations aren't inclusive of a more holistic framework. Meaning, like, when we're not as children understanding the reciprocity of cow poop and the life cycle of an animal in a regenerative system, we miss out on those opportunities. So I totally agree, and I think there's so much room in childhood education and bringing kids to farms, regenerative farms, and composting centers for them to understand. My daughter is 4 years old, and she's just an immensely amazing advocate because of the little stuff that we've learned so far. So I agree with that.
Great, thank you. We also have a comment just saying from Ellie saying, even though she's been in the compost benefits world for some time, your message and passion continues to provide inspiration and innovation to what we do. So thank you.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions on kind of puzzles or who you're working with or your context that you're starting from, whether you're a compost producer or other, any situations that I might be able to lend some thoughts or contribution to, feel free.
Yeah, thank you so much, Finian. This has been really great and really inspiring. And I'll just say we're going to continue some of this conversation tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with the soil builders, making soil health a priority in our communities conversation that I'll be facilitating. A lot of it is around really focused on the question you asked, Finian, in terms of where are we underemploying compost and soil health concepts, and how can we really meaningfully bring that into our communities so it makes sense and we all can act on that responsibility that you mentioned, or agency of making some changes, and that small changes add up. So just a little plug for that tomorrow.
Yeah, it's really great. And I encourage each of you to participate meaningfully in that. But above and beyond that, I can't say it enough how critical for if those of you are here, if some of you are upper management, if you are executive, or even if you're not, is the little work that you do now in terms of framing and messaging. It will live within inside you, or even re-engineering. When I do full day soil health workshops for compost industry folks, a lot of what we work on in those workshops is dialing in and connecting the source of your company or your organization to what you're trying to and want to achieve with compost, and kind of 2.0ing it. I mean, what I mean by that is like some of the answers on kind of what compost is indicative to kind of where compost has been put in lieu of all the other tools we have to help. But you and I both know that compost is far superior and far more important than a lot of these other levers that are getting more funding, getting more attention, and the like. So when you're looking at embedding that into the mission of your organization or the plans for what you're going to do, then when you're saying, oh, we don't have a social media manager, or so-and-so, we haven't been telling the story, or we haven't been taking our camera and doing updates on what we're doing and sharing those with the world. Any iota of awareness spreading, or sharing with staffers from your city council, or the council members themselves, or the state lawmakers, them being able to engage in this, them coming to a Kiss the Ground screening, and you setting up a panel where you have a compost industry expert, you have a representative, and you're saying, hey, together, we're going to be recontextualizing this because rebuilding soil is a priority. Restoring our watersheds through soil rebuilding, through these ecosystem benefits that happen, the watershed, everything else that we've talked about. Compost as a means puts compost in a position, not over glorifying it, but putting it as a key tool that people who make city decisions, state decisions, or even their own households can contribute to, no matter what, from supermarkets, hospitals, you name it, can contribute at the very least to this side of the regenerative conversation. Everybody can compost, and arguably then that's everyone's quickest in, even before starting a garden, their quickest to helping is composting. It's the lowest hanging fruit.
Great, thank you. And we just have a couple minutes. 2 questions came in, and I'll let you see what you can do in 3 minutes or so, Finian. One is whether you could share a little bit of your own story and how you came to do this work. And the other one is, where do you see the future of compostable products or foodware in compost?
Compostable products or oh yeah, okay. I came to this, Graham State, the amazing soil health legend guy from New Zealand and Australia, did a 4-hour presentation to us describing soil health and how regenerative ag works. And I thought I knew most things about sustainability and environmentalism and everything and climate change. I thought I was in the know. And I was like, how the heck did I not know about soil health? And so that same day I went like, well, if I didn't know about this, probably most people in the world don't know about this. I better dedicate my life to this. Otherwise I'm kind of a jerk, because now that I know, it's terrible to keep it in for myself. But the more the nuance, but also for me, about 9 months before that happened, I had a crazy dream where I was this old guy living in Brazil because climate change had just wreaked havoc on the world, and the Atlantic currents had shifted and a global ice age had hit, and like billions of people died, and desertification and ice was everywhere. And in this dream, my granddaughter wakes me up in the middle of the night in this refugee camp, and we find a hole in the fence. She sneaks me out, and she's like, "Oh, cool." We walk this whole way, and as the dawn approaches, we look over the crest of this hill and see the city. It's just completely destroyed for whatever reason. And she just looks up at me with tears in her eyes, and she's just like, "Why did you let this happen?" She was talking about the whole thing, like the whole letting go of Earth and just dismantling its functioning capacity. And she was so mad. And I woke up from that dream and was just really forever changed of like, if I don't get my butt in gear to do something, I will be an old man who answers that with a terrible answer. And so that was really what kicked me in the butt. And then finding this answer and being like, well, if this is true, I had to do a bunch of research, but if this is true, this is the biggest solution that humanity is sleeping on right now. And a lot of indigenous cultures have had in their mindset for so long, but largely we are asleep to it. And that's why Kiss the Ground's mission is awakening people to the possibilities of regeneration, because it's sitting there. We just have to be awakened to it. So that's really what got my start in this, and knowing that I could champion, I could help in a little bit of a way. I wasn't the expert, I wasn't the farmer or the scientist, but I knew I could help champion along with my good pals who helped start Kiss the Ground with me. But to answer your question, I think, compostable materials, we have to go there, and we have to push and push and push and work with industry leaders, meet people who are in control of business, and like convince them that like their money spent on creating truly compostable packaging or whatever is important. Like, get them emotionally invested. Reach out to see people who have authority and be like, you gotta do this. We can do this together. Like, it's so profoundly disgusting the amount of plastic waste we're doing. Like, you got the means, have to be a leader. We'll stand by your side and help you do it. But yeah, that's what I would say is, and then for cities and stuff, whatever mandates you can have that push the needle on that, but working on both sides, offering help to both the writers of the law to write it with you, but then offering help to the business leaders and inviting them in, but simultaneously putting pressure on them to lead on it, not just yelling, but being a constructive criticizer by providing answers and research.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Finian. We are just at the hour, but this has really been a pleasure. So lovely to have you be able to join us. And in the park, it looks like where you're at. Nice to sort of see your little ecosystem there and hear the wind. So thank you so much. I'll just...
So sorry about the wind again.
Oh, no worries.
This was the only place we could find to at the moment. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. It really wasn't distracting. I didn't think. And then just a quick plug. We do have one more session coming up this afternoon, the Compost Carbon Connection. So we'll be able to dig in a little bit more on that and learn about carbon offsets through soil regeneration. So today's theme is really regeneration and compost and carbon, and really deepening our understanding to that. And then tomorrow, as I said, we'll start the day with CAV's Soil Builders program, and then have a talk at 1 p.m. about compostable packaging, pros and cons, and how do we all do it and engage in this in a little bit more responsible way, and help other folks understand the importance of this topic. And then tomorrow is our first in-person Johnson Sioux compost workshop. Thank you so much,
folks. Take care.
Take care, everybody.